I'm Les Binet, Head of Effectiveness at adam&eveDDB. I want to talk about price, the forgotten P. So, first of all, a quick question to you lot. Hands up, how many of you were working in this business before 2009? Oh, wow. Actually, that's much more than I thought. You're not so young yourselves, are you? It's like being in an old folks' home. When I've asked that question to other audiences, quite often you find that there's hardly anyone in the audience who was working in the business before the financial crisis. The reason I ask that is because the period from 2009 up to 2022 was a very unusual period in world economic history and the economic history of the West. It's what you might call the era of free money. Very exceptional times, although maybe at the time we didn't realize it. Two big things about the era of free money that were unusual. The first was very low and very stable inflation. So I grew up in the 1970s when inflation hit sort of 15, 20, 26%. And when inflation was yo-yoing up and down all the time. If you look at the history of the last 200 or 300 years, inflation has tended to be either high, like it was in the 1970s, or very unstable, sometimes going through periods of strong positive inflation, sometimes going through deflation. But really, the period of the last sort of 10 to 20 years has been a period when inflation has been both low and stable. And that's not happened really at all for that length of time in the last couple of hundred years. Why does that matter? Well, it matters because businesses and marketers have been able to ignore price. Setting your prices has become a very easy routine thing. Once a year, you do an inflation price rise. It's very mechanical. You look at the rate of inflation, you put it up by 2% or something, off you go. So you don't really need to think about price very much, and you don't need to think about price very often. That's the first reason that price has been ignored, is it's just not been a thing you needed to do very often. The second thing is, this period, the era of free money, has been a period of incredibly low interest rates. So this chart shows interest rates going back to 1800 in the UK. Look at this period here. This is the era of free money. The lowest interest rates for a couple of hundred years. And in fact, actually, there is data going further back. Basically, this is the lowest period of interest rates, the lowest interest rates for about 300 years. It's way, way off the norm. Now, that has an effect on business strategy in that, effectively, money has been free. You can borrow money, you don't have to pay for it. There's no strong incentive to make profits. Markets have been very, very happy to wait for future profits. So price is no longer, has not been much of an issue for the last 10 or 15 years. Profit has not been much of an issue for the last 10 or 15 years. It's a sort of lovely period where you can just basically do whatever the fuck you want. And that ended last year with this increase. Yeah, sorry about that. It ending. We've seen interest rates beginning to climb. It's probably not finished yet. And I very much doubt that we will be going back to that period when money was free. Really, we probably should expect interest rates to reach somewhere about 4 or 5%. That's the norm, that's the historic norm, and stay there. So all of the sort of lovely warm bath of easy monetary conditions and low inflation that we've lived in for the last 10 or 15 years is, in my opinion, over. I might be wrong, but I think it's over. Now, what did that do to marketing? Well, two things. In a world where investors and financial markets, where there's low interest rates, investors and financial markets are very happy to wait for future profits. They don't necessarily demand profit right now, but they're patient and will wait for profits at some point in the future. So, now, that tends to lead to a focus not on immediate profits, but on market share. Now, if you know the work that I've done with Peter Field over the years, we constantly bang on about the fact that market share is a really important business metric. And it is an important business metric, and the reason it matters is that market share does affect your long-term profitability. So in general, this is from the famous PIMS database, a massive database of business strategy stretching back to the 1960s for many different firms, showing how their business strategies affected their business performance. And what the PIMS database shows and continues to show is that the higher your market share, generally, the higher your return on capital, the higher your profit margins, the more profitable you are. So being big is the key to big profits. And that's particularly true in this digital world where there are so many markets now with network effects. So if you think of, for example, social media, it's really important to be big because the bigger you are, the more you attract advertisers and the more you attract customers. So you get this self-confirming sort of flywheel effect. So in the era of free money, many businesses were focused on building growth, building market share, the land grab approach where you just basically go, we forget about profit, we'll just make sure that we get as much of this market as we can before anyone else. And the way that many of these businesses attempted to do that was through innovation. Because, of course, in a world of free money, there's unlimited amounts of cash available for investment in new technology, new businesses, new processes. And innovation is a very powerful tool for generating rapid, indeed exponential growth. Amongst the dot-coms, there's often been this feeling that marketing was kind of cheating. What you do is you focus on technology, you focus on innovation, and that generates exponential growth without having to spend money on things like advertising, which is kind of cheating. And in fact, there's some truth in that. So I don't know how many of you know of the Bass diffusion model of innovation. It's a mathematical model of how innovation diffuses through an economy, proposed by Frank Bass in 1968. Frank Bass was the other half of the Ehrenberg-Bass, the forgotten half of the Ehrenberg-Bass duo. And Bass's model showed that when you have radical innovation, you get basically exponential growth in your customer base at first. So what tends to happen is when you have a better mousetrap, the world beats a path to your door. You get exponential growth in the customer base, exponential growth in sales at first. And this is where the innovators get it wrong. The assumption is that if you've just got radical innovation, you get exponential growth forever. Wrong. It's not an exponential curve, it's an S-shaped curve. So all innovators eventually realize that innovation runs out of steam. Facebook discovered this a few years ago when suddenly their user base began to plateau. Netflix, we saw Netflix reaching the inflection point a year or so ago. Now, the answer to that, if you're an innovator, is a stream of continual innovations, serial innovations. But that requires a stream of investor cash. And that stream, that tap, has now just being turned off. So we are now in a new world where investors want profits not just in the future, they want them now, and where they are not prepared to fund a continual stream of innovation with no profit. And it's maybe not everybody realizes this, but most of the big, highly admired innovators that we have talked about so much in the last few years make very little money or make a loss. So, you know, the Netflixes, the Ubers, the TikToks, hugely loss-making companies. They make no money. Amazon, which is now a very old company, 20-something years old, barely makes any money. Makes a very small profit, mostly from cloud computing. As a retailer, it's a low-margin retailer. So that was fine when money was free, but now we need to encounter some new realities. So it's time to go back to the 4 Ps. Purpose is not one of the 4 Ps. Purpose is just a way, I didn't mean to talk about this, but purpose is just a way to destroy profit. Those of you who have seen the analysis that Peter and I have done with the IPA data bank will know that our data shows that purpose-driven marketing actually reduces business success and profitability. So let's forget purpose. What we focused on, those innovators have tended to focus on the first P, product, which is massively important. It is the most important P. And they've focused on place, which is also massively important, physical availability, digital availability, making sure that your brand is in everybody's pocket on their mobile phone, making it really easy to buy stuff with one click. And then to the extent that they've thought about marketing communications, they talked about promotion, which is of the 4 Ps, that means marketing communications in general. And there's been a tendency to focus on the short-term stuff, what Peter and I call activation rather than brand. We'll come back to that in a minute. But the one thing that people have neglected is price. In fact, many marketers don't even seem to see price as part of their job. That's something for someone else. But price is massively important because price, as we'll see, has a huge effect on margins. And as a result, it affects the profitability of all other activities. Everything you do. Nothing can make money in a business if your pricing is wrong. Your advertising won't pay back if your pricing is wrong. Your innovation is pointless if your pricing is wrong. There is no point in getting distribution if you don't get your price right and don't get your margins right. So it's time to rediscover price and think about price more deeply than we've done for maybe 20 years. The key concept to understand is the concept of price elasticity. When you put your price up, so as you move your price up, in general, your volume will go down. There are some very rare exceptions, possibly, for luxury goods, but generally, you get a curve that looks like this, which is usually an exponential type curve. And the price elasticity basically tells you the slope of the curve at the place you are on that curve. So if your price elasticity, if you put your price up by 1% and your volume goes down by 2%, your price elasticity is 2. It's the ratio of the volume to the price, volume movement to the price movement. That's what price elasticity means. Apologies for reiterating that if it's obvious, because I hear a lot of people talking crap about price elasticity as if it means something to do with the degree you can stretch your brand or something like that. People in marketing like to use economic terms to mean things that are completely different to the true meaning of the term. Why does price elasticity matter? Well, think about a business that increases its price. Imagine, for example, you have a product that's priced at £1. You sell 100 million units, so you get revenue of £100 million. Your variable cost per unit is 60p, so your variable costs are 60 million. On top of that, you've got fixed costs of 30 million, so your profit is 10 million. Now, you increase price by 10%. So you go up to £1.10. Now, assume that your price elasticity is 1, which is a sort of average. Then your volume will go down by 10%. Your price goes up by 10%, your volume goes down by 10%. Your revenue is unchanged, because those two things equal each other out, balance each other out. Let's assume your variable cost per unit hasn't changed, because that can sometimes move. In that case, your variable costs go down by 10%. Your fixed costs are unchanged. Fixed costs are fixed. Your profit goes from 10 million to 15 million. That's a 55% increase in profit. A small tweak in price, a 10% movement in price, increases your profit by 55%. And you don't have to spend any money, apart from maybe, changing the stamps, the stickers in the shop. It's the easiest way to make money, is to get your pricing right. Now, price elasticity varies from brand to brand, and that affects what this does to your profit. So I've looked at a range of price elasticities here, from minus 0.5 to minus 3. We had price elasticity of 1 there. That's a profit increase of 55% for a 10% price movement. Apologies for the maths. I don't normally do this. I'm not very good with numbers myself. What you can see here is if it's very price sensitive, the more price sensitive the brand is, the less profitable it is to put the price up. And in fact, when you get to this point, where you've got price elasticity of 3, you actually lose money by putting your price up. Conversely, if you've got a very insensitive brand, a brand where consumers don't care very much about the price, you can get really big profit increases by putting your price up. So, price elasticity is a neglected metric which is absolutely massive for profit. And people didn't care about it, as I say, because people didn't care that much about profit, immediate profit, and they didn't move their prices very often. But now, in a world where prices are volatile, where inflation is high, and where investors want profits now, you have to think about this metric, you have to measure this metric, and you have to try and control this metric. So how do you do that? Well, the only way I know to measure price elasticity reliably, there are a couple of other things you can do, but econometric modeling, or market mix modeling, as it's a baby way of describing it, but econometric modeling is the only way I know to measure price elasticity properly. Econometric models must always measure price, but we've tended, again, to neglect it over the last few years. So for those of you who, I'm not going to explain how econometrics works, that's a whole other presentation on that, but basically what econometrics does is says sales are influenced by many different factors. I've shown, 4 factors here: distribution, price, weather, and advertising, but a good econometric model might look at 200 factors. And then what it does is it uses a set of mathematical techniques, usually based on multiple regression, to work out the relative contribution of each of those factors without there having to be any direct link between them. You don't need attribution metrics, you don't need customer journey data or any of that stuff. You just look at how these things correlate with one another, basically, so that you can decompose your sales into its component parts and say, well, in this particular case, the biggest single factor driving sales is distribution, and then the second biggest is the weather, price is massive, and advertising is a small layer on top. And that's actually typically what it does look like. Advertising is a minor factor at the margins affecting consumption of brands. Now, it sounds like it's a magical black box, but it's kosher. This stuff, there's 100 years of mathematical theory behind it. This stuff wins Nobel Prizes. As the Nobel Prize Committee said in 2000, econometrics provides the standards of proof which studies everything from household spending and investment to the organizations of industries, labor markets, and the effects of public policy. It's hardcore stuff. I think of all the Nobel Prizes given for economics in the last 60 years, 2/3 of them have gone to econometricians. You can't say that about attribution modeling. Okay, so econometrics is the tool you need to measure your price elasticity. And when I first started doing econometric modeling 36 years ago, a great deal of what we were doing was measuring price elasticity. And what I've seen is over the years, marketers have become less and less interested in it. Well, you need to become interested again. And you can use that stuff to measure your price elasticity and then to optimize your price and control the effect of price on margins. The first place to look is your promotional activity, because the fastest, the easiest, and most profitable way to change your pricing is through dialing your price promotions up and down, for most brands anyway. So let's look at what econometrics tells us about the effects of price promotions. Now, when you do price promotions, the effects usually appear to be very big. You do a bog off, you do 10% off, and your sales will immediately surge. And the effects appear to be very big because what you'll find is if you compare, for example, packs sold on deal versus packs sold at the regular price, most of your volume appears to come from the packs sold on deal. However, when you use econometrics to measure the true incremental effect on sales and profit, the picture's rather different. First of all, you'll find that a lot of what appeared to be incremental volume is in fact what you might call subsidized volume. So you sold packs at 10% off, but they were packs you were going to sell anyway. So a lot of that is not actually incremental volume. Secondly, you find that a whole load of the volume is time shifted. These are packs that you would have sold next week or the week after, but you've sold them early. People buy the stuff on deal, stock up. Then there's sales that are relocated from somewhere else. You do a promotion in Tesco's and it robs sales from Sainsbury's. So the true incremental volume from price promotions is much smaller than it appears to be when you look at the data in a superficial way. Econometrics will tell you that. What it will also tell you is that most price promotions tend to actually lose money. I think most brands don't know that. Repeated price promotions, if you're constantly on deal, they teach people to buy on price and they increase price sensitivity. They increase price elasticity. And as we saw, that's a dangerous thing. That affects your ability, reduces your ability to charge premium prices and to make money. So at the best of times, excessive price promotion is usually an own goal. But these are not the best of times. At the moment, most firms are dealing with rising input prices, rising costs, and they need to be able to pass those on. They need pricing power. And price promotions undermine your ability to do that. So price promotions are a dangerous and addictive drug at the best of times, and right now they're, for most businesses, sheer madness. I worked with a brand a few years ago where we managed, the brand in question was coming up against supply constraints, and they were thinking about things that they might do to cope with the fact that they couldn't, for about 6 months, manufacture enough product. I suggested they simply turn price promotions off for 6 months. That brand saw a 20% increase in profits overnight. It was the easiest way to make money you could possibly. You basically just had to stop doing stuff and you made more money. When they turned price promotions on, again 6 months later, their profits went straight back down. Now, as I say, in the era of free money, everyone was focusing on volume. Now we need to focus on volume and price. So the work that Peter Field and I have done with the IPA data bank shows that if you increase volume, that's usually quite a profitable thing to do. So if we look at the number of cases that report big gains in profit versus whether or not they increased sales and market share volume metrics, yeah, it's quite profitable to increase volume, but it's generally more profitable to keep volume fixed and increase price. It's basically accounting. Remember, in that example earlier on, when you increase price, you actually, your costs go down, so all of the benefit goes straight to the bottom line. But when you increase volume, you're increasing revenue and costs. So generally, supporting price is a more profitable maneuver. It's hard, but it's more profitable. But the really big increases in profit come from brands that manage to both increase price and volume at the same time. Is that possible? It is possible. And the way you do that is by having the right mix of brand building and activation, the long and the short of it. Remember that there are two ways to use marketing communications to generate sales and profit. Activation focuses on the short term, on getting people to do something right now. Basically, we're talking about things like direct marketing, performance marketing, price promotions, the stuff which just converts people immediately, right now. Price promotions are very powerful for doing that, but the effects are very short term. They decay away very quickly. Brand building is about building up brand equity, building up knowledge of the brand, feelings towards the brand, memory structures that mean that people will want the brand not just now, but in the future. Those effects take longer to build, but they last longer, they build up longer over time, and crucially, brand building not only generates volume, but it also supports price by reducing price elasticity. People will pay more for the brands that they feel warmly towards. So long-term brand building is the key to firmer pricing. We see no examples where brand firms have been able to reduce price sensitivity through short-term activation. You can only do that through brand building. And the more you move brand metrics, the stronger the effect on brand metrics like mental availability and positivity towards the brand and so forth, the more likely you are to reduce price sensitivity. And I think the latest research from Kantar, which sort of supports, as I understand it, this hypothesis that strong brand building metrics, strong movements in brand metrics, lead to firmer pricing and stronger profit. And also there's some great work from Brand Finance last year which pointed in the same direction. Our research shows that this is a long-term job. You don't do this overnight. You will not achieve it in under 3 months. You only begin to see these effects after about 6 months or more. And really, this is the kind of thing that happens over years rather than months. There's a very famous paper by Lodish and Meller called If Brands Are Built Over Years, Why Are They Measured Over Quarters? It's a very good paper which highlights the importance of focusing on price elasticity as a performance metric and the damage that promotions do on that metric. I thought I'd just give you an example. I mean, when you talk about increasing price and volume together, it sounds like an impossible thing to do, but it can be done, and I've seen it done, and we have seen it done. So Felix Cat Food, one of my favourite case studies. Back in 1989, Felix was a very small brand, about the 5th or 6th biggest brand in the category, on the verge of being delisted by the supermarkets. It hadn't been advertised for decades. It was dying. And they gave it one last shot. They refreshed the packaging with a cute little black and white cat on it. And we, BMP as we were at the time, we ran some press ads at first and then later TV ads featuring the black and white cat doing cute things. We said nothing about the product really. All we said was cats like Felix, and we had Felix the cat doing cute stuff. What happened to this brand? Well, they had a market share of about 5% when we started out, and then over the next few years, they went from being delisted, or close to being delisted, on the verge of extinction, to being overtaking Whiskers as the brand leader in the category, just by having a little black and white cat frisking about doing cute stuff. That was an amazing volume story, but the other story is that over the same period, price elasticity fell from being above 1 to below 1, going from being a price elastic to a price inelastic brand. Steady fall in price elasticity, which meant that they could increase the price. So not only were they quintupling the volume, but also they went from being one of the cheapest brands to one of the most expensive brands. Massively profitable. And that's what you can achieve by just having a little black and white cartoon cat and some cute music. Okay, so our work on the IPA data bank, the long and the short of it, and the subsequent books that we've released on the subject shows that in order to achieve this, you need to do some stuff with your budgets. Premium brands, if you're going to pursue a price strategy, you need to spend more. It's expensive. You also need a different mix of brand and activation. We talk about the 60-40 rule as a sort of average for a typical brand. Premium brands, it's more like 70-30. So you need to spend more, and you need to spend more of it on brand building. I'm conscious of time, so I'm going to skip past this study, but there are 3 other ingredients beyond budget that you need to succeed. The first is reach. In the era of free money, I think we've been overly focused on targeting and on the efficiency of marketing and on the fact that we've wanted to own segments of the market and pinpoint them with laser accuracy and not waste any money. And that's wrong. Marketing effectiveness is more about reach than targeting. Various studies, including work by Nielsen, for example, show that reach is more important than targeting. Waste is less of an issue than we think it is. In fact, under some circumstances, conspicuous waste can actually be a positive thing for brands. If one breaks, for example, if one breaks marketing into campaigns that target existing customers versus acquisition campaigns versus broad reach campaigns, you know, there's been a lot of stuff over the years about the importance of building up strong relationships with existing customers. We have, in all of the years of the nearly 2,000 case studies that we've got, we see no examples whatsoever of targeting existing customers strengthening pricing power. That CRM, all that stuff, absolutely useless when it comes to trying to firm up your pricing. Actually, it's more about acquisition, and more importantly, it's all about reach. The campaigns that are most likely to firm up your pricing are the ones that talk to everybody in the category. So this is less about tightly targeted communications and more about broad reach advertising. Secondly, it's not about telling people things. There are no examples whatsoever in our nearly 2,000 case studies of people who've managed to persuade the public to pay more for things by rational argument. Because if you think about it, getting people to pay more for the same old shit is not a rational thing. It's emotional. The key to pricing power is to get people to feel something about your brand, to disengage the rational brain, to make people just want the thing at any price. The third ingredient is fame, and this is why I think waste is sometimes good. Campaigns that consciously aim to make the brand and its marketing famous are much, much better at reducing price sensitivity and supporting premium prices than any other kind of marketing. Basically, if you talk to the whole category, if you talk to the world at large and you make people feel something about their brand, about your brand, then you will reach a point where people will pay more for it. So people pay more for the things they love and more for the things that everyone is talking about. And the way you do all that is creativity. Creative advertising, highly creative advertising, is much better at getting an emotional response and is much more likely to generate fame. We see that, much as I hate Cannes, we were talking about this earlier on, those campaigns that win at places like Cannes are much better at reducing price sensitivity than the generic run-of-the-mill kind of advertising. And the kind of stuff that is tightly targeted and performance marketing often makes things worse. So, it's time to focus on price again, because it matters crucially, particularly right now. So we need to learn to measure and control price sensitivity. We need to beware the false allure of discounting and price promotions. And we need to get back to strong brand building, because that's the key to pricing power. And at the heart of that is a rediscovery of the importance of creativity. And you know, if anyone needs a great creative agency, I do know one up in Paddington. Thank you.